Let's go ahead and talk about it. Go get you two tops. One is for the pattern, one is a solid top. Go ahead and grab your skirt that you just made and then grab two pairs of pants and let's go ahead and talk about it. All right, from this title, y'all know it's a sew along and a pattern review. So if that's some content you would like to see, please continue to watch. Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you a pattern review as well as get you over to the sew along for the next pattern as part of my Make 9 2023. Yes, I don't know what number I'm at, but I think this is like the 5th one for Make 9 2023. I could be wrong, but who's counting? I'm not really. But this is Simplicity 9791. I showed you guys, and before you guys get on to me, I know your girl was supposed to drop it last Sunday, but we had birthday stuff going on last week, so I had to still take photos. So I wanted to drop it for you guys today, or I actually took all the photos Friday and edited yesterday on Saturday for you guys to have it ready for today, Sunday. All right. Now, if you are new to the channel, welcome. Hello, Ciao, Guten, Aloha, Hola, Konnichiwa, Wagwan, Sambalani, Salom, Bonjour. If you are returning, you guys know what to do. Go get you a quick snack and something to drink and come on back so we could go ahead and get into this video. Now, you guys know every video I literally put up concession stands for you guys to stop and pause because this is a three-part. It's not three-part in terms of the videos, but it is 3 parts. So I'm going to put concession stand at each part. Now, in the sew along, you will see that it's the top, the skirt, and the pants as well. So there will be concession stands there as well. So before we even get started, go ahead and get your drink so you could go and your snack so we could talk about this pattern review and then off to the sew along. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so let's go ahead and start off with this pattern review. Now, I'm going to give my own simply because I did not look at the Simplicity website before sitting down. Now, I took my photos in 2 days, so that's why if you're looking at the photos, you will see that hair was down in a few photos and then I put it up. You are absolutely correct. Because while I was taking photos, it started raining. So we put it up, 86 taking photos. I could have took it, yeah, okay, whatever. But I'm not gonna even say that. But I could have literally just waited until the rain passed. But I had other things to do. Okay, let's just face that. But let's go ahead and get into the pattern review first and then off to the sew along. So the pattern that we are reviewing is Simplicity 9791, which is the one that won for the summer skirt 2023. So I'll let you guys vote on the Google form. If you have not voted on the Google form, your voice is not being heard. And every season, I basically tell you guys to vote, and whatever pattern win is the pattern that I do for the sew along. So if you don't know, stay tuned for any of the drops that we do, and then I post the Google form. Stay tuned because I'm going to be posting it for fall coming in the next upcoming videos next week. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern description for this pattern, Simplicity 9791. So this is a 3-piece build a wardrobe. It's an easy to sew pattern. I'm giving my own, so don't judge me, all right? So view A and view B is the top. It has 4 buttons, even though I did 5, and I'll tell you guys about that here shortly. So view A is your sleeveless option. View B is with the sleeves, and the sleeve have a sleeve stay. All right. So you will have a darts in the front, the bottom front. You have darts there. You also have pleats at the shoulders for the sleeve, not the shoulders, but the sleeve cap as well for the sleeves for view B. In terms of view C, which is the skirt, you have a yoke. Instead of a waistband, you have a yoke, and then you have all the tiers. And it also, you can contrast it if you want, which is what I did, but you don't have to contrast it if you do not want to. You also have a invisible back zipper in the back for the skirt. Now, in regards to the pants, same thing. You have a yoke front, and a yoke back, which forms that waistband. You also have patch pockets for the pants and a invisible back zipper as well. Now, if you do not want the patch pockets, you can do inseam pockets instead of the patch pockets on the front of your pants. Now, one thing that I forgot to do, and because we were cutting this on the fold, I did not put pockets on my skirt. If you want that opportunity, I'm gonna say know where your side seams are, all right? So that's the pattern description for this pattern. Let's go ahead and talk about skill level. I already kind of said it, but it's an easy to sew pattern. So the skill level for this pattern is easy to sew. Do I feel that it's easy to sew? Yes. However, if you're doing the top, I wouldn't say the top portion is easy in terms of sewing because you will need to be able to make buttonholes and buttons and all that stuff. If you are extending the pattern, which we will talk about in modifications, there will be some things that you need to make sure that you pay attention to as well, which I will talk about here in a moment. All right, let's talk about the notions used. So for view A and view B, the top, you will need 4 buttons. Now I use 5 because I extended it, and I'll talk about that in modifications. And on the skirt, which is view C, you will need, I believe, a 9-inch zipper, invisible zipper. Yes, 9-inch invisible zipper, which I used the longer zipper in the sew along because that's what I had in my stash. And then when it came to the pants, I had a shorter zipper. I only had a 9-inch zipper. I don't know how that happened, but you will need a 9-inch zipper in order to do view C, the skirt, and view D, the pants. Let's talk about fabric. So in terms of fabric, the fabric is from Joann's. So one thing I want to mention is the fabric, which I'm going to show you guys the fabric. You'll see it in the sew along, but I'm going to put the pants up here. So the fabric, it shows like a faded navy for the fabric, and I purchased it like that. I didn't know that I actually like it like that instead of if it was like a very nice bright navy. I don't know. It turned out really, really good. Better than what I envisioned for this, all right? I'm not going to get into pattern pieces, but I will tell you, you will need all the pattern pieces on this pattern, which is 16 of those, okay? Now, I'm going to talk about the pattern pieces in the sew along, so I'm not gonna go over them right now, but you will need all 16 pattern pieces if you are doing every single view to make kind of like build a wardrobe, which is what I did. I'm trying to use more of the views on the pattern because you guys ask for different views all the time. So if it intrigues me to make more views from the pattern, I will do so. And that's what I did here. I did the top, the skirt, and the pants. Now, if you are just making the top, view A, you will need 4 pattern pieces number 1 through 4. If you are doing view B, which is with the sleeves, you will need 6 pattern pieces, 1 through 6. If you are doing view C, which is the skirt, you will need pattern piece number 7 through 13, which is 7 pattern pieces. And then if you are doing view D, which are the pants, you will need a total of 5 pattern pieces, which is pattern pieces number 12 through 16. All right, I hope I was able to tell you that as well. Let's talk about the pattern sizing for this pattern. I wasn't impressed with the pattern sizing because if you are a plus size, you probably would have to definitely size it up. I had to do a little bit of grading at the hips as well. And yeah, it comes in size 4 to 20 on this pattern. So I wouldn't say this pattern is size inclusive, but I will definitely say size it up because it's a really good pattern to do. In terms of the skirt and the pants, the top I love, but I had to definitely lengthen it in order for it to be able to be worn to work. But I definitely have to wear some high-waisted pants in order for it to not show tummy and all of that stuff. Because anytime I make something, I have to be able to wear it to work because I'm out the house. I'm not inside the house working. All right. Let's talk about the sizes that I cut. So for view B, I cut a size 18. View C and view D, the skirt and the pants, I cut a size 20 for that. However, the waistband, I'm gonna go back in because it is a little too big in the waist. And one thing that I noticed about the pant is I have a little too much ease in the front. So I'm gonna go back and fix it and take it in at the side seam and a little bit at the crotch seam as well. But other than that, they do fit. I like the fit, but I want to make sure that I don't have like a big old pooch going on. It looks like a big pooch in the front. So I want to definitely go in and take it in. By the time you see in this, I already fixed it. All right. I will probably already fixed it by the time you are seeing this video. All right. Let's talk about modifications. Did I make any modifications? Absolutely, I did. So the only modification that I made was to the top. I lengthened the top by 4 inches. I showed you that, guys, that in the sew along. One thing I will mention, if you are lengthening your pattern not to show tummy, for whatever reason you want to lengthen your pattern, this is what I'm going to say. I did not lengthen at the very bottom. Actually, I did. Instead of me cutting a line, I lengthened it at the very bottom. But hear me out. I lengthened it at the bottom. Correction, I lengthened it at the bottom. But when you lengthen it, yes, you need to go down however many inches you need. But I want to make a caveat. Do not forget the darts. So in the sew along, you will see that my lining is navy blue, but then towards the end, you see a black fabric, which is what you see right now, right? I completely cut it all over and did it all over because it did not fit in the waist down. And here's the reason why. I did not account for the darts that's at the very bottom. Measure your darts at the very bottom, from the waist down. Measure. So my dart, because I cut a size 18, I think the dart measured 3 inches across at the very bottom at the hem. So what I did is I measured across, removed that 3 inches. You're going to have 2 darts in the front. So I made sure to remove that, and that took off 6 inches, measured it across, took off 6 inches, took off the seam allowance, and then I enlarged it by that same amount at the side seams, and then it fit like a glove. So therefore, make sure you measure the dart and when you close up your dart, how many inches you will be losing for the waist. Make sure you do that, because the first one, I could only literally button up 2 buttons. So that 3rd and 4th button, it wasn't happening. However, because I have a sibling who's a lot smaller than me, I will be giving it to her, and I told you guys that in this sew along. All right, let's talk about, did it look like the photos and the drawings on the pattern envelope? Yep, it does. It does. And literally, I wanted to pretty much kind of do what the model is wearing. Sometimes these patterns are not giving with the model. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'm not gonna say nothing bad about the models, because it's not the models, it's more of the styling. The person who's styling some of these models is just not given. So I wanted to do my own thing with this pattern, and I hope, I was able to do a little bit of justice, but it is a basic, simple pattern to do. I will say that. All right. Are the instructions easy to follow? Yes, they are easy to follow. You guys know with sew-alongs, I try to follow the instructions to the T, but sometimes I go out of order. So just bear with me with going out of order, but it's just to save you and myself sometimes going back and forth to the sewing machine after every single step. You guys know this about me. If you've been following my sew-alongs for quite some time, you guys know that I will pin and sew many of these at the same time to cut down on how many times I go to the sewing machine. I'm pretty sure you guys enjoy that as well. All right, let's talk about likes and dislikes. So let's talk about the dislikes first. The only dislike is the patch pocket for the pants. I think because my fabric is busy with the florals, I think I should have left that off and did a inseam pocket instead of a patch pocket. But outside of that, I actually love the pants and how they came out. I think I should have just did a inseam pocket instead of that patch pocket. I like the skirt. I was surprised that I actually liked the skirt, even though I like tiered skirt. But I didn't know if I was gonna like it with that yoke front piece instead of a waistband, but I actually like it. And then in terms of the top, I actually love it. So the top came out amazing. I love the sleeves. The sleeves stay, or sleeve facing, whatever you want to call it, it's actually not as bad as you would think. And I actually made a sleeve like this when I did my Easter dress back last year in 2022. I'll go ahead and put that on the end screen as well and show you guys here what that dress looked like. I love that dress. I actually wore it on my birthday when we went out to eat that night. My husband and I, we left the kids with some people or whatnot. Yeah, it was amazing. So outside of my birthday, I haven't worn that dress since making it for Easter last year in 2022. It's a lot of fabric, and I showed you guys in that video how to put everything together. Now, it wasn't a step-by-step sew along, but it was a sew with me, but I just did not tell you, kind of like walk you step by step. But it was kind of like a very thorough way of me showing you how to do it without just kind of like, now you do this, now you do that, now you do this, now you do that. But it was kind of like, now we pinned this, go ahead and sew it. So it was more of a sew with me instead of a step-by-step sew along, but I walked you through every detail and got more in detail when it came to the sleeve. So it's a lot of pattern pieces if you decide to do that, but that's New Look 6694. All right, so let's talk about first time experiences. Do I have any first time experience for this pattern? No, I don't have any first time experience, but it's the first time that I sewed a yoke front and back like this. So I was a little on the fence with it. All right. Would I sew this pattern again? The top, yes. I don't think I need another tiered skirt right now. And the pants, I don't know if I would sew the pants again. Even though I like the pants, I don't think I would put I like the yoke. I don't think I would put the patch pockets on. I think I would do inseam pockets, but I could potentially see myself sewing this pattern again. Yes, I think I would sew it again, to be honest with you, but definitely the top. All right, would I recommend this pattern to others? Absolutely, simply because I did a sew along for her, so why not? Well, that's it for the sit down pattern review. I hope you enjoyed it. And now that we are complete with this pattern review, go ahead and refill quickly. I'm gonna give you 10 seconds and we're gonna go ahead and get into the sew along. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next sew along as part of hashtag Make 9 2023. This is the skirt block that's part of Make 9 2023. This is the summer skirt, and the pattern we are doing is Simplicity 9791. It is an easy to sew pattern. So one thing I will tell you is I will not walk you through how to size up your pattern in this video. I have a video how to size up because this is more focused on the skirt, but I'm going to show you the top as well. And in a different video, I'll show you how to size up the bust and the waistline. All right. But this video will not be a size up for the waist and the hips, simply because when I did Butterick 6946 last week, I showed you how to figure out how to size it up. So I'm going to link to that Let's Figure It Out video, which is the title of that video, on how to figure out how to take the right measurement and cut the right size. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern instructions and pattern pieces in order to construct this skirt. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about a little bit about the instructions. Not much on the instructions, but what I will be doing in this sew along is view B, C, and D. Now, I will tell you right now that I have not cut out the sleeves yet. And the reason why is because I have to pick up more fabric. So if the fabric is available at a different Joann's, I will definitely go ahead and do view B. If not, I will be doing view A. But by the time I do the sew along for view B, I will probably already have fabric for it, or I will tell you which view I'm doing during that time. Hopefully I can get some more fabric to do view B because I prefer the sleeves instead of the sleeveless option. But I plan on doing both views anyway. All right. So this sew along will pretty much be for view A or B. The only difference is the sleeve, view C, and view D. All right. So in terms of the pattern pieces to cut, go ahead and cut out all the pattern pieces, pattern piece number 1 through 16. I'll discuss what pieces you will need when the sew along for each section comes about. I'm not going to get into the cutting layout because I think by this time with my sew alongs, I have already, mentioned how to cut out your fabric at this point. Now, one thing that I will mention is going over to the sewing directions. Make sure you understand what darts, gathers, edge stitch, finish stitching, invisible zipper, narrow hem, stay stitch, stitch in the ditch, top stitch, and understitch. Make sure you know what all of these are. I would highly advise you to read it. You can also scan this QR code and it'll take you to how to do these items right here. All right. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the instructions because we're going to be sewing along step by step. So basically you'll be doing the front, the back, putting on the facing, putting on some lining, putting on the sleeves in step B. If you're doing A, there's no sleeves. Now, in terms of the skirt, which is view C, you will be attaching the yoke front to the yoke back, attached it to the top tier, then the middle tier, then the bottom tier. You'll also be putting on a zipper there as well, and then you'll be hemming. It's not much to do when it comes to the skirt as well. And then view D, which is the pant, you'll be making darts in your pants front and back. You'll be adding on some pockets. You'll be attaching the yoke front and the yoke back, putting in a zipper, and then hem. So this is relatively, I want to say, a pretty quick sew. I haven't sewn it yet, so you guys are going to be sewing it with me on this video, but I'm pretty sure this is a quick sew, but we will see. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this garment. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces that you will need in order to do view A and view B, which is the top, is what I'm going to talk about first. So the first thing you will need is, of course, pattern piece number 1, which is your front for both view A and view B. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining fabric. All right. Now, one thing I will mention is I enlarged my bottom piece by 4 inches. Now, just make sure that if you enlarge it like I did, because I want to be able to wear this as a top, not just as a crop top, because I couldn't wear a crop top to work. So therefore, I enlarged it by 4 inches. If you do that, you need to mark in your waistline. I'm going to bring it up so you can see. So that's why you see waist right here at the very bottom. And you need to measure across. And then if you need to size it up for the waist, do that and make sure it fits. Because the worst thing you want is to size it up and it's too tight at the bottom. All right, so make sure you do that. You know how to do it. You could go back to my video where you measure across, multiply it by 2 because it's cut 2. And then take out the seam allowance. The seam allowance will be 2.5 because you will have 2 front pieces, one on the left, one on the right. All right. So that's what you need to do for this. I will go ahead and put up the finished garment measurements at the bust for each side. Now the pattern piece, the pattern size that I have is patterned the size of 12 through 20. So that is what I'm putting up on the screen to tell you the finished garment measurement. All right. The next pattern piece that you will need to cut out is pattern piece number 2. You need to cut 2 of fabric. This is your front interfacing. So you only need to cut interfacing. You do not need to cut regular fabric. So the thing about it is I cut mine out of fabric, but I might still use mine out of fabric, but it's the front interfacing. So you only need to cut this out of interfacing. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 3, which is the back. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. I'll also put up on the screen the finished garment measurements for your back pattern piece. And just like for the front, I did make sure that I marked the waistline down here, measured across, and then went ahead and sized it up. Now, I did not necessarily need to size it up because it fits for the size that I cut, which is a size 18 for my pattern. All right, moving over to the next pattern. Now, this is your buttonhole guide. You do not need to cut this out of fabric or interfacing. It's just a guide to mark your buttonholes when you are done. Now, I will have more buttons than you will simply because I enlarged mine. So I'm just going to make sure that I make the spacing for that enlargement of my buttons. All right, so I will probably use about 6 buttons instead of 4. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5, which are your sleeves. You need to cut to a fabric. If you are doing view B, the sleeves is for view B, all right? And then the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 6. This is also for view B. This is your sleeve facing. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. Now, those are all the pattern pieces that you will need in order to do the top. Now, this is for view B, but the sewing between view A and view B is the same. The only difference is doing the sleeve. So I might as well tell you that the sew along is for view A, and once we get to the sleeves, then we'll go into doing view B. But I will definitely tell you where we are every step of the way. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into the sew along for the top. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the tools and supplies you need in order to construct Simplicity 9791. Like I mentioned, we'll be doing pretty much all the views on this pattern for sure. I'm trying to give you guys what you guys want, and this is one that won for hashtag Make 9 2023. The skirt is the one that really won, but I'm just going to do all the views on the pattern. Why not, right? So the first thing you will need is, of course, the pattern and the pattern instructions. You will definitely need scissors. I use 2, one for paper, one for fabric. Never mix the 2 there. You will also need pins. If you do not use pins, you can also use wonder clips. That's up to you if you choose to do so. I have 2 rotary cutters, one for fabric, one for paper, and never mix the 2 there. I use pens and pencils. Pens and pencils is for any type of sizing up or sizing down or making extra darts or manipulating and drafting some other stuff. So you will need a pencil or a pen. I have 2 rulers. Both of these are see-through rulers, and it's basically to mark out my darts. For that, I also have marking tools like the disappearing marker, the white chalk, my blue chalk because I have dark fabric. Also, you will need a seam ripper. If you make any mistakes, you could rip out your seam. You will need a tracing wheel if you decide to trace out your pattern as well. For this one, I'm not tracing it because I don't know if I'm gonna like the skirt or not. If I like the skirt, I will pick up another pattern when the Simplicity pattern sale is back on. All right. I also have a tape measure, and the reason why I have my tape measure is because I went ahead and measured myself. You should get in the habit of measuring yourself with every project that you do. And because, like I mentioned before, I'm on a weight loss journey, so every project I will be measuring myself. Make sure you measure your bust, your waist, and your hips for this project. I highly advise you to measure your upper bust as well, which is right underneath your armpit. All right. Also, I have some drafting paper, and the drafting paper is because I lengthened my pattern as well. I also have some tape to tape down the pattern. And then I also have my, I'm going to call it my pattern weights. And the pattern weights is just some coins from my husband's fraternity. You can use pattern weights from Home Depot. You can use washer. You can actually use regular pattern weights, whatever you choose. And then I have a calculator. The calculator is for me to size up the pattern. I have already done that. I have a video, like I mentioned before. Let's figure it out, is how to size up for anything at the bottom portion of your body, your waist, and your hips preferably. So the skirt will work perfect for that. I have a video. I'll drop it in a link below on how to size up like a jacket pattern. It'll be the same thing, your bust and your waist. All right. And in terms of notions, the only thing you're going to need is you're going to need 4 1/2-inch buttons for the top, and then for the skirt and the pants, which is view C and D, you will need a 9-inch invisible zipper. All right. Mine is just a little bit longer because that's what's in my stash, but that's all the tools and supplies you will need in order to construct this pattern. So let's go ahead and get into the sewing. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the sew along. So what I want you to do, I did some prep work, so I'm going to tell you what I did. So first things first, grab pattern piece number 1, which is your front. So what you want to do is grab pattern piece number 2, which is basically your front interfacing pieces, which is what you see here. Now, first thing I want to tell you is if you enlarge your pattern piece, you need to enlarge the same amount. If you added length, you need to enlarge or lengthen it by the same amount. Now I lengthened this piece by 4 inches, which is what you are seeing right here. And basically because my top is 4 inches longer, okay? So make sure that you lengthen your interfacing piece, which is pattern piece number 2, if you lengthen your pattern piece. So I'm gonna say that one more time. If you made an adjustment to pattern piece number one in terms of length, you need to make that same length adjustment for pattern piece number 2. Because if you do not, then your pattern piece will be short like this. So I went ahead and when I cut out my interfacing, I remembered to lengthen it by 4 inches. All right, so that's the first thing you need to do. And then what I did is I went ahead and stay stitched the top. So I stay stitched down and just a little bit around that corner section, okay, right here, this curve. You're going to stay stitch both of your front pieces, including the lining. You want to do the same thing for the lining that you did for your front. Now, your lining piece is not going to have interfacing, so do not interface the lining piece. You're just going to stay stitched from the top at the shoulders around that curve, okay? Just like you see here for my main fabric, I did the same thing for my lining fabric as well, all right? So I'm going to show you my lining fabric. All right, so you want to stay stitch both. After you stay stitch your front pattern pieces on both your main and your lining, you want to go ahead and do your darts, okay? And then your darts need to be pressed to the center front, which is where you see the interfacing pieces at. Do not press your seam allowance towards the back. It needs to be pressed towards the front. You're going to do the same thing on your lining piece. And you guys know I like to do my lining at the same time I'm doing my main fabric because it's going to already be done by the time I get to the lining portion, okay? So make sure you press your darts towards the front. Now, if you feel like your darts is too long, you can cut it up, trim it down, press it to the front, however you see fit, because this is basically going to be lined, so you're not going to see the darts anyway, but to each his own, all right? So that's the front. The next thing you want to do, I went ahead and did this as well. I stay stitch the back pattern pieces as well. So stay stitch. So basically I'm going to show you my lining pieces. You see how that stays stitched right here. And then the main fabric as well, I stay stitch that portion as well. Now, in the instructions, it tells you in the directions of the arrow. So you're going to go from your shoulder all the way to your center back seam. All right, stay stitching. All right, so make sure you do that on both your lining fabric as well as your main fabric. All right, so now the next thing you're going to do, you're going to close up the back. So with right sides together, you're going to do this on both your lining as well as your main fabric. I'm just going to show you on the main fabric. So what you want to do is go ahead and stitch up your back. So make sure you are pinning at those 2 notches that you have in the back. I think it's 3 notches. I'm sorry. 3 notches in the center back. And you're going to pin at the bottom and then pin all the way along the seam allowance for your back. So go ahead and pin your center back seams now. All right, so now that I have my back, which is pattern piece number 3, pin along the center back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Now I will start sewing at the hem and come all the way up to the top. You're going to do that on both your main fabric as well as your lining fabric. So go ahead and sew your center back seam in place and then press your seam allowance open on both the main fabric and the lining. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my center back seam sewn, I have it pressed open for both my main fabric as well as my lining fabric. I'll show you the lining fabric here shortly. Now, if you are doing view A, what you will be doing is attaching the front to the back. Well, I'm sorry, yes, the front to the back at the side seams. I'm sorry, the shoulder seams, okay? So it's going to look like this, and you're going to attach front to back at the shoulder seams, okay? So that's what we're gonna do now. So whether you're doing view A or view B, we're going to attach at the shoulder seams, okay? Now, if you are doing view B, they want you to go ahead and sew up your side seams as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin my shoulder seams so I can explain to you about the side seams. So go ahead and pin your shoulder seams now, making sure you match up that notch, and then pin at the start. You're gonna pin here, and then I'm gonna pin over here as well, all right? So now that I have that pin, I'm gonna go down to my side seam. So let's say, for instance, that I am doing view A. They do not want you to pin your side seams. And the reason why is simply because you will be doing some understitching. So after you sew across the top, the shoulders, you're going to pin your lining to your main fabric, and then you'll understitch and all that good stuff, all right? So I'm gonna bring the instructions for view A. So basically we are on, I haven't been paying attention to be honest with you, but we are on step number 3 with right sides together. You're gonna pin the lining to the top, matching centers and seams, and then you're gonna stitch your lining to top. You're going to leave the side seams, the armhole, and the lower edges open. So the only thing that you will be sewing when you attach your lining to your main fabric is along the front edge, all right? So along the front is what you're going to be stitching in the neck area, all right? So I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna try to show you very, very closely on number 3, right here. You're just going to stitch along the front and along the neck area. Okay, you're not gonna stitch the armhole whatsoever. You're not gonna stitch the side seams or the bottom if you are doing view A, all right? So if you are doing view A, follow along with step number 3 and then understitch your front and your neck edge, okay? As far as you can go, all right? And then once you do that, you're gonna pull it out, and then that's when you'll attach, okay? So this is for view B. So if you are doing view B, continue along with me. So what we're gonna do is go to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch across the shoulder seam. So let's go ahead and do that now on both your main fabric and your lining fabric now. So now that I have my shoulder seams done, the next thing you're gonna do is sew your side seams. So now normally I would go ahead and do my sleeve and sew my sleeve and my side seam, but because I have to get some more fabric in order to do my sleeves, we're going to do the sleeves a different way. We're not gonna do the flat method. We're gonna do a set and sleeve. So it gives me time to go ahead and get some more fabric that I'm gonna go pick up today after pretty much this is done. With that being said, we're gonna do right sides together and we're gonna pin our side seams. So go ahead and with right sides together, you're gonna do the same thing on the lining fabric. So don't forget to do your lining fabric, and I'm gonna turn it and pin my side seams. Make sure you match up your notches, pin at your hem area. You're gonna pin at the top and then pin along the length of your side seams. So go ahead and pin your side seams now. Now that I have my side seams pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew along your side seams. Once you finish sewing them, go ahead and press the seam allowance open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the main fabric and the lining fabric attached at the side seams, that's what you're seeing here. What I'm going to do is attach the lining to the main fabric, right sides together. And I'm going to match up the center back seams. So make sure you are matching that up. And I'm going to pin the center back seam first. And then I'm gonna pin around the front. So Go ahead and pin around your front, making sure you are matching up the shoulder seams on both sides. So go ahead and pin along the front of your top now. All right, so now that I have my lining pinned onto my top, so along the front, along the neck edge, and then along the front on the other side. That's everything that's pinned. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna start in the center back using a regular length stitch and 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna back stitch at the back, sew along the neck edge and along the front, and back stitch at the end. Then I'm going to flip it over and go in the opposite direction and do the same thing using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once I do that, I'm gonna press my seam allowance towards the line. I'm gonna trim it down, press the seam allowance towards the lining, and then understitch. You should be understitching on your lining, and you'll understitch at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance as far as you can, okay? So go ahead and stitch along the neck edge and the front, trim it down, and then understitch. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I am done understitching, it's looking really good so far. What we're gonna do now, let me tell you what I did. After understitching, I gave it a good press. I went ahead and basted around the armholes to keep that in place for my sleeves. So what you're going to do is before I get to that, I left a little opening on this side right here for me to turn it right side out. Now, if your hole is not about a good 5 inches, if you cannot stick your hand through it like this, then you need to make your hole a little bit bigger, okay? You could do it on either side seam, okay? Do not do it on the seam where the darts are, just any side seam. You need to leave a little opening for you to turn right side out. Because what we're about to do is attach this bottom. And you're going to need a little opening. I'm going to open mine up just a tad bit more, just like that. So now I can reach my hand in like this, and it's not ripping anything, okay? So now this is the right side of my fabric. I'm going to turn it right sides, basically right sides together, just like so. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch up the bottom, okay? Now that we have that side seam open, and it should be, the opening should be for the lining fabric, not your main fabric, okay? So do not open up the side seam for your main fabric, just one side seam of the lining fabric, all right? So let me go ahead and get everything turned right sides together. So go ahead and turn everything right sides together. All right, so now that I have everything turned right sides together, what you want to do is make sure that you are matching up your darts, make sure you matching up your centers, make sure you are matching up everything. Now, what I'm gonna do is turn it so you could see this, where the bottom is up to where you can see it really good, okay? So I'm going to pin the dart to where the darts are matching up. You want everything, I mean everything matching up, okay? This is the part where it is crucial to have everything match, all right? So now at the seam, I'm going to make sure that that match up as well, and I'm going to pin. Now make sure when you are pinning the bottom portion of your top, everything lines up, and then you're gonna pin all the way across, all right? So go ahead and pin along the bottom hemline of your top now. All right, so now that I'm getting to the other side to pin, I wanna make sure that my darts are still to the front on both sides. So this is the front on my left side. So make sure that your dart is facing the front on the left side, and then on the right side, you will notice that my dart is still facing the front that direction, all right? So go ahead and finish pinning the bottom, making sure that your dart is facing the front portion of your top. So go ahead and pin the bottom portion now. All right, so now that I have my top pinned all the way across at the hem, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now what I'm gonna do is I like starting in the center to keep everything even. I'm going to start in the center, back stitch at the beginning using a regular length stitch. So all the way across one direction and then back stitch at the end. Then I'm gonna flip it over like this, where the lining is showing. And then I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the other side, sewing to the end. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Go ahead and sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, sew your hem in place. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the hem done, I'm gonna turn it so you can see it, just like this. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take that opening and I'm going to turn everything right side out. Now I did go ahead and trim it after I sewed the hem in place. So now what I'm gonna do is take it through that opening. Make sure you do not rip anything. Be gentle, please. And then just turn it right side out. So go ahead and turn your garment right side out through that opening now. All right, so now that I have it right side out, I'm gonna take my point turner and I'm going to poke out any type of holes, sharp edges and corners and stuff like that. Poke out your corners, but do not put any holes in your top. So just be gentle and just go all the way around, making sure you have everything kind of turned right side out through that opening. All right, so I'm just gonna go all the way around now. All right, so now that I have it turned right side out, I'm gonna give it a good press to press that bottom in. And then what we're going to do, you would be attaching your sleeves, but I'm gonna leave my sleeves for last. And then we're gonna go ahead and pretty much mark our buttonholes and everything right now. So go ahead to your ironing station and give this a good press so we can go ahead and mark our buttonholes now. All right, so now that I turned it right side out, I gave it a good press. So the next thing I'm going to do is, of course, I'm gonna do this by hand, and all I'm going to do is just basically close this up, just kind of, you know, basically slip stitching with a needle. You can do it at the sewing machine if you wanna be lazy like that, you can too. Do that. Just make sure you close that up, okay? Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and top stitch along the front and along the neck edge as well. I just top stitched the bottom for right now, but I'm going to go ahead and do that once I make my buttonholes and do all of that. All right. So after you top stitch all the way around along the bottom, along the front, and around the neck area, make sure you do that. If you notice, I still do not have sleeves on because I will be doing that last. So we're gonna do the sleeves. Just work with me, okay? Just work with me there. All right. So the next thing you're gonna do is make your buttonhole. So go ahead and grab your buttonhole guide. All right. So now that I have my buttonhole guide, go ahead and grab your pencil, whatever you're using to mark your buttonholes. Now, if you remember, I said that I lengthened mine by 4 inches. So I'm gonna have more buttonholes than you. And then what you wanna do is make your buttonhole on the right side, wearing it, looking at it left side. So you see what I'm doing. Make sure all the fabric is to the left of you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my buttonhole guide, just like you see here. I'm going to match it up with the top and make sure that it is to the front of my garment. And then I'm gonna grab my pins and pin it in place. So let me grab my pins, and then what I'm going to do is pin my buttonhole guide in place, just like so. So go ahead and pin your buttonhole guide in place now. All right, so now that I have my buttonhole guides pretty much pinned in place, what I'm gonna do is mark my buttonholes all the way down. So go ahead and mark your buttonholes all the way down now. All right, so now that I have my buttonholes marked all the way down, because I have 4 inches that's added, what I need to do is adjust my buttonholes a little bit more. So what I'm gonna do is find that last buttonhole. So I have one right here. And then my last one is right here. Okay, right there. And I'm just gonna definitely mark the rest of my buttonholes now. And then I'm gonna take from where that last buttonhole is, and I'm gonna basically pen, I'm gonna use this one. I'm just gonna pen where that buttonhole is. Just readjust, pin there at that last buttonhole, and then make the final buttonhole at the bottom. So I'm just gonna pin this in place to make my buttonhole at the bottom. All right, so now that I have, instead of 4 buttonholes, I have 5, because like I said, if you add more inches, you may have more buttonholes than I would, but I'm just going to pin where my buttonholes are, because that's where I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew my buttonholes in place. So I want to pin my buttonholes now. And I have 5 buttonholes right there. So now what I'm going to do, this is what you need to do because we are pretty much at the end of the tutorial for this. Outside of doing the sleeves, we will do the sleeves in just a moment. But if you are doing view A, you're pretty much done. The only thing that you need to do is make your buttonholes and then sew on your buttons, okay? That's all you need to do if you are doing view A. If you are doing view B, you're gonna make your buttonholes, sew on your buttons on the other side, and then we're gonna start constructing our sleeves, all right? So go to your sewing machine. Now every sewing machine is different, so that's why I'm not gonna show you how to make the buttonholes, but go to your sewing machine and make your buttonholes in your top now, and then we'll come back and do the sleeves. Go ahead and do that now, and don't forget to sew on the buttons on the other side of your garment. Now I am just going to be using these gray buttons for it to have a little bit of pop. So that's what I'm going to be doing for mine. But go ahead and make your buttonholes and sew on your buttons on the other side now. All right, so now that we have the button sewn on, we have the button holes, the buttons, and now we're gonna do our sleeves. Now, one caveat I want to make is, if you notice you are not seeing a navy blue fabric, you're seeing a label now, because I redid this entire top, okay? So I'm gonna show you the other one quickly. All right, so I'm gonna move this one out of the way. I'm gonna show you the one with the navy blue and tell you why I redid this top. Okay, so first of all, this one is the navy blue that, you know, we did the sew along for, okay? And then when I came back, because, you know, we getting ready to do the sleeves, right? You seeing me switch to black. It's lining, because I don't have any more navy blue lining. So I'm giving this one to my older sister. The reason being is because it is too freaking tight in the boob area, okay? So even though I cut a size 18 for the top, it was too tight in the boob area, and the waist, like the last button, was not finna button up. We not having those problems whatsoever. So I'm gonna tell you a couple of things that I did on this one, that I made the adjustment to the other one with the black lining. So before we do the sleeves, let me say this now, even though I have already said this in the pattern review. So because I lengthened the bodice, I did not account for the darts. The darts are 4.5 inches at the bottom on both darts. I did not account for that, which made the waist area super duper tight to where the button would not fit, okay? Also, in the bust area, I advise you to size it up 1.5 inches to give you some ease. And the reason why is simply because unless you plan on not wearing a bra, go with whatever size that you do. Now, because size 18 gave me a 43.5, I thought it was going to be enough. And I do not wear push-up bras or padded bras or any type of underwire. I know it's TMI, but I'm telling you this for a reason. So I had to size it up to 1.5 because it was too tight to where I literally took off the bra and it was still too tight, okay? So my bust on the other one, which I'm going to show you here shortly, is a 45 finished garment measurement. The waist is a 34-inch finished garment measurement as well. All right. So now that I showed you the one that I am giving to my sister, I'm going to show you the one that I am keeping, which have, of course, my garment label in there. Okay. So now what you seeing is a nicely beautiful finished inside. Now I do want to mention that this side right here on this side is not closed up yet. I am going to take a hand needle and sew that closed when I'm completely done. Now I have tried it on. It fits amazing. Okay. And yeah, that's where we at right now. So we're going to go ahead and start constructing our sleeve. So move this out the way and grab your sleeve. All right. So now that I have the sleeve, the first thing I'm going to show you, this sleeve is already done, but I'm going to show you on the sleeve that I haven't done yet, just to kind of show you. So grab your sleeve and your sleeve facing, and you should have cut 2 of your sleeves. One is done, and this is the one that's not done. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is transfer all your notches and your dots. Also, make sure you transfer your 5 darts at the bottom as well. Now, I'm not going to walk you through how to do darts because we have done darts so many times on this channel. So you're just going to pin out your dart in the back and make sure that you press them down, okay? Also, after you do your darts, right? After you do all of your darts, the next thing you're going to do is make sure you do 2 rows of gathering stitches along the sleeve cap. And then with right sides together, you're going to pin your underarm seams, pin at the notch, pin at the top and the bottom. And then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And then what I would do is go ahead and finish off my seam allowance. You could either, now for me, I am going to be doing my seam allowance separately instead of together. That's a personal preference because you're going to be installing a sleeve facing. All right. So after you do that, I'm going to show you what that looks like on the one that I have already done. And then I'll do that one here in a second. Okay. So just to show you what I have done, if you can see from this, I have already went ahead and done my darts. I'm going to press them down. And now I also have my gathering stitches done at this sleeve cap. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and with right sides together, I am going to finish these off before I actually take it to my sewing machine and sew it together. Okay. So go ahead and pin at this notch, pin at the top, pin at the bottom, and then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then sew this under seam. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the underarm seam sewn on the sleeves, make sure you do the same thing to your sleeve facing. Now I'm going to show you on the sleeve that I do not have pinned, okay? So on your sleeve facing, I'm going to move that one out the way. What you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to pin your sleeve facing at the notch, pin at the top and the bottom, and then sew 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right. Press that seam open, and then you want to finish off the bottom edge. Okay. The bottom edge down here, you want to finish it off with your serger, pinking, short shears, turn it 1/4 of an inch. However you've been finishing off your seam allowance, you're going to finish off your seam allowance. Okay. So once you do that, it's going to look like this, right? It's finished off like you see right here. It's pressed open. And then all I did was with right sides together, I pinned my sleeve facing to my sleeves. This is what it looks like so far. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, sew all the way around and back stitch at the end. Once I do that, I'm going to trim it down and then understitch, basically pressing my seam allowance towards the sleeve facing and then understitch on the sleeve facing at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have both sleeves done, right, and it's ready to be installed, I'm going to move this one out the way and just work on this one. You're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to kind of walk you through. So of how to do the sleeve. We have done, now this is not the flat method, what I prefer to do, but since this have a sleeve facing, you need to sew the side seams and then just do a set in sleeve, all right? So, speaking of the sleeve facing, what you should have done is pressed it to the inside after understitching, pressed it to the inside. And then I just basically tacked on the sewing machine at every seam. So right here where the underarm seam is, I just basically did some stitching in the ditch. Here's a dart right here. I'm gonna move it up so you can see. There's a dart right there. I just stitched in the ditch right there on that dart. And all 5 of the other darts. Then that way, let me turn it right side out so you can see. So then that way, when wearing it, you don't have it flapping up all the time, okay? So I just made sure to kind of like stitch on the right side in the ditch, in the grooves of the underarm seam where the dart is. So basically all 5 of those darts, I definitely did some tacking down, okay? So that's what it looks like on the inside, all right? And this is what it looks like on the outside. All right, so it looks like a really, really, really nice sleeve, okay? All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach the sleeve to the shirt so you could be done. This is the last step that you would need to do to this top if you are making the sleeves. If you are doing view A, which is sleeveless, you are already done with your top, okay? So with the right sides together, we're gonna pin at the underarm seams. All right, so pin there and make sure that you have the right sleeve. And how do you know if it's the right sleeve or not? Your notches will match up. You see how I have a single notch here? I have a single notch there. I'm gonna make sure that both of my notches match up, and then I'm going to pin right there. And the 1 notch signifies the front of your shirt. The 2 notches right here signifies the back of your shirt, top, whatever you want to call it, okay? So you're going to make sure that you pin those double notches, and then you're gonna pin all the way around. Now, while pinning all the way around, you want to pull up some gathers to make sure that you gather it into its place. However, you want to gather a little bit. You don't want a lot of bunching going on at the sleeve cap, all right? So go ahead, pull up some gathers, and make sure you have your sleeve fit onto your armscye or your armhole, your top, all right? So go ahead and pull up some gathers now. All right, so now that I have my sleeve pinned into my armhole area, I pulled up the gathers as much as possible to make sure that it fits, but it looks really nice and it's not looking janky whatsoever. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna start at the underarm seams and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning, so all the way around, backstitch at the end. After I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and finish off my seam allowance with my serger. You're gonna do that for both sleeves, all right? So once you do that, you are all done with your top. All you need to do is give it a wash, give it a press, try it on, take some pictures, and yes, that is all for this top. Make sure you do the other sleeve. I'll be doing my other sleeve here shortly as well. Well, that's it for the top. If you make this top, do not forget to tag me at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. All right, so now that we have covered the top, you guys know what to do. Go to the concession stand, refill right quick. I'm gonna give you 10 seconds and we're gonna go ahead and get over to the skirt. All right, so now that we have done our top, let's go ahead and move into doing the skirt, which is view C on this pattern for the tiered skirt, which is this one right here. Now, in terms of the pattern pieces you will need pattern piece number 7 through 13 for this pattern. Make sure that you interface pattern piece number 12 and 13 for your skirt, which is 12 and 13. You're gonna do the same thing for the pants if you are doing the pants. I will show you how to do that here shortly, but make sure you interface pattern piece number 12 and 13 for the skirt, all right? So let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct the skirt. All right, so the first pattern that you need will be pattern piece number 12, which is your yoke front for view C and view D. We are doing view C right now. So make sure that it actually says you can contrast. I just did it in the same fabric. So you should have interface one, and then the other one is used as your facing to go on the inside. So you need to cut to a fabric and interface one. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 13, which is your yoke back. You need to cut 4 of fabric and interface 2. So that's why you see 2 of here, 2 is interface, and then 2 is not interface, and the 2 that's not interface will be used as facing pieces. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 7. Now this is your upper front. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric. Make sure that the right side of your pattern piece is facing down on your fabric and cut around. Now this is my contrast color right here, which is the black that you will see, all right? Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 8, which is the upper back. You need to cut 2. This is my contrast fabric as well. So 7 and 8 are contrast fabrics, okay? Everything else is in the navy blue. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 9, which is your middle front. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric. So this is the navy blue. So even though it says contrast fabric, I use navy blue as my contrast fabric and use black as my regular fabric, just FYI. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 10, which is the middle back. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 11. This is the last pattern piece. This is pattern piece number 11. It's your lower front and back, and you need to cut 3 on the fold of fabric. So this is my black fabric. It's 3 on the fold of fabric. Now those are all the pattern pieces that you need in order to construct this skirt. So let's go ahead and get started with the skirt. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the skirt. Go ahead and grab pattern piece number 7 and 8, which are your upper front and upper back. Now what I did is I went ahead and gathered the top portion, which is right here. So I left about 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both ends of the upper front, which was cut on the fold. So I'm gonna try to show you that. It's a dark fabric, so you may not be able to see that. So I left 5/8 of an inch undone on this side. I back stitch at the beginning using a basting stitch. We have done gathers before on this channel. And I have done that also to the back pattern piece, all right? So grab pattern piece 8. And what we're going to do is with right sides together, you want to sew the side seams. Now, I'm going to tell you how you know if it's right sides together. The middle, the back, you will have a notch there, all right? And also make sure that your curve is matching up. And then you're also going to have a notch that match up on the side, all right? So you have a notch that's going to be towards the bottom in the back. And then on the side, you have a notch that's kind of like in the center, all right? So you're going to pin your side seams. If you want to serge your side seams before you sew it, you can do that. I'm serging my seams together in one continuous seam, all right? So go ahead and pin at that notch, pin at the top, pin at the bottom, and then pin the length of the side seams on both sides. So go ahead and do that now. Now that I have both side seams pinned on the upper front and back, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew your side seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my upper front and upper back sewn together at the side seams, I've finished it off. You can now see my gathering stitches right here. Go ahead and move that off to the side. Grab pattern piece number 12 and 13, which are your yoke front and your yoke back. Now, the piece that's not interfaced, that is your facing piece. So you want to lay that down because I'm going to do this both at the same time. It's easier that way. Trust me when I say that. And what you're going to do is you're going to match up the side seams just like this. All right. You want to make sure it matches up perfectly. So I'm going to show you how to match this up. All right. So first of all, you have notches at the bottom. I'm going to do it on this piece. Okay. So you want to make sure you know where your notches are at the bottom. You're going to take this piece right here and you're going to match that up with the side seam right here because you have a notch. You should have a notch on your side seam. All right. And that straight edge should be in the center. You're going to take the other pattern piece and do the same thing on the other side. Now, I'm going to pin. You really don't need to pin, but I'm going to pin. But using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And you're going to sew your side seams down on your yoke front and your yoke back. You're going to do the exact same thing on your facing pieces as well. That's not interfaced. All right. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my yoke front and back stitched right sides together at the side seams. So this is my mains and I went ahead and interfaced that because I want it to be pretty much, you know, stiff and not just flimsy waistband around my waist. Now that's why I went ahead and labeled it facing so I know which one is facing because I went ahead and interfaced both of them, okay? So that's what I did as a personal preference. You do not have to do this, but go ahead and move this off to, actually don't move it off to the side. Just grab pattern piece number 7 and 8, which is your upper, front, and back. And what we're going to do is we're going to gather the upper portion of it and attach the front to, the yoke front and back to the upper front and back. Now, I gathered, the front and then I gathered the back, which is the side. So I'm just going to use my threads and pull up a little gather. So go ahead and pull up some gathering stitches on your front and your back now. All right, so now that I have my front and back, upper front and back, I should say, gathered, now what you're going to do is you're going to take your yoke front and back and you have some notches right at the bottom. You're going to match that up with the notches in the center of your front. So you have to look for those notches, okay? So go ahead and look for the notches and you're going to pin across. So go ahead and do that now, matching up your side seam. So I'm going to pin at the side seam first and pin at the end and then adjust my gathers. So go ahead and pin your skirt, your front, your yoke front and back to your upper front and back now. Making sure that where your notches are will be attaching to your upper front and back. So go ahead and pin now. All right, so now that I have my yoke front and back pinned onto my upper front and back, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, I'm going to start in the center, back stitch in the center, sew to one side, then I'm going to turn it over and do it in the opposite direction. All right, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. So go ahead and sew your seam allowance and then you want to press your seam allowance up towards your yoke. So to go trim it down and then press your seam allowance up towards the yoke. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now we have our yoke front attached to our yoke back. This is what it looks like. That's what yours should be looking like as well. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and trim our yoke front and back down. So just go ahead and trim down the seam allowance to your yoke front and back now. All right, so now that I have my yoke front and back trimmed down, what you want to do now is go ahead and press your seam allowance up towards the yoke like this, and then you want to get ready to go ahead and install your zipper. So what I'm going to do now, we have done zippers so many times on this channel, So I'm just going to kind of tell you what to do. I'm not going to walk you through doing a zipper because we have done that so many times on this channel. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pin. Now I advise you to go ahead and place about 1-inch strip of interfacing along the side of your zipper. I like to do that to stabilize my zipper area. And then I'm going to pin right sides together. I'm going to match up my seam allowance for this seam allowance and make sure that it is matching up, because the last thing you want is your seam allowance not matching up and your zipper is not looking right, okay? So pin at that notch right here, and then pin the length of your center back. Now you are basically putting a zipper in the center back of your skirt. So go ahead and pin all the way up. All right, so now that I have it pinned all the way up, I'm gonna start right here at the notch. Okay, so I'm gonna start at the end actually. I'm gonna back stitch at the bottom, so all the way to the notch right here. I'm gonna bring it closer so you can see it. You're gonna back stitch there, switch to a basting stitch, and then base from this notch all the way up to the top, all right? Once you do that, press your seam allowance open and then install your zipper. Like I mentioned before, we have done zippers so many times on this channel. I will go ahead and tell you that you could go to my zipper installation, which is Butterick 4868, which was a skirt that I did. I will go ahead and put the link in the description box below so you're able to see how I install my zipper if you're interested. All right, so go ahead and install your zipper and we'll come back and continue with the middle, front, and back section, which is pattern piece number 9 and 10. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and installed the zipper, it's looking flawless. Y'all see that? Y'all see that? Get into that. All right, so now that we got the zipper in, go ahead and move this off to the side. Grab pattern piece 9 and 10, which are your middle, front, and back pattern piece. And you're pretty much gonna do the same thing that you just did for the upper, front, and back. You're gonna go ahead and gather. Let me go ahead and take this off. But you're going to gather the front. This is the front, pattern piece number 9, this long piece. You're gonna make gathering stitches along the top of both pattern piece number 9 and 10, which are your middle front and your middle back. And then with right sides together, you're gonna do the exact same thing. You're going to attach, you should have a notch on the side, which is your center back piece. You're going to, let me make sure. You're going to attach where you have your 3 notches, that's going to go in the center. So you're going to attach where you have the 1 notch off to the side. I hope that makes sense, all right? And then you're just going to pin your side seams with right sides together. And pin up your sides, making sure that those 3 notches in the back are in the back, if that makes sense. I'm gonna bring the pattern piece. This is pattern piece number 10. You see this line where it says center back, where you have these 3 notches. Make sure that it's in the center back. It's not at the side seam because it's not gonna match up, okay? And then you have a notch right here that match up to your side seam. So this is your side seam, this is your center back seam where the 3 notches. All right, I hope that makes sense. So with right sides together, you're going to pin your side seams. So basically pin at that notch that you have on the side, pin at the top, pin at the bottom, and then pin the length of your side seams. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the side seam pin using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off both side seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and gathered the top, I have the side seam sewn, the front to the back at the side seam is sewn. So now we're gonna take the center back seams of the back. So you should have the 3 notches right there. So you're gonna line that up and you're gonna pin at those triple notches. Let me get my pins. So pin at the triple notches, pin at the top and the bottom, and then pin the length of your center back seam lines. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew up the center back seam. Once you do that, go ahead and finish it off. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my center back, this is my center back seam. I also have both of my side seams sewn as well. I have the top gathered. So the next thing I'm gonna do is take my skirt. This is what it's looking like. This is my yoke back piece, my upper back piece right here, which is this black fabric right here. So I'm going to make sure that it's right sides together. And I'm just gonna take this inside and I'm going to make sure that the back of my upper back is facing my back. It's going to look a little weird. So you want to have the middle section, which is the middle, front and back, wrong side out, right? And you want to make sure that it's right sides together before you do this. Now, this is my center back because it has my zipper. So I'm going to make sure that I am actually making sure that that's lined up. So I'm going to line up the seam allowance there. And then I'm going to pin. I keep losing my pin, y'all. All right, so I'm going to turn it around so I can really see and work with my fabric really good. So I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to pin at that center back. Make sure that you are pulling up enough threads and gathers, I should say, when you are pinning. So pin there. Then what I'm going to do is go to the side seams. And I'm going to pin, making sure my side seam is towards the back of my garment, not to the front. And I'm going to pin there. And of course, I'm going to make sure that my gathers are even all the way around. After I pin this side seam, I'm going to go to the other side seam and pin there as well, which would be right here. So I'm going to make sure that I pin that side seam as well. So I'm taking this one and pin it to this one right here. I know it looks funky. Don't worry about it. It'll be A-okay. All right, so now that I have everything pinned, I'm going to adjust my gathers. So go ahead and adjust your gathers to make sure everything is fitting on there nice and smoothly. So go ahead and adjust your gathers now. And one thing that I'm going to mention is make sure you adjust your gathers and pin all the way around your skirt, making sure that you adjust your gathers and pin all the way around, attaching or pinning, I should say, your upper front and back to your middle front and back. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my middle tier onto my upper tier, or you know, your middle front and back to your upper front and back, like I showed, the zipper is there. I would advise you to go ahead and try it on, see if it fits. Now, one thing I noticed about mine is that the upper tier is pretty loose and I want it that way. So I'm not going to do any changes to mine simply because it fits in the waist like I want it to fit. And it does have a little more room that I wanted on the upper tier, but it's okay, you know, because I don't want it tight whatsoever, but I don't want it super baggy and super loose. So it's right where I need it to be. All right. Now, I feel that because we have done the upper tier and the middle tier, you should be able to do the last tier on your own. All right. So I'm going to move this out the way and I'm just going to kind of tell you what you will need to do. And then you could pretty much do it. I don't feel like I need to walk you through how to do the lower tier because we have already done the upper and the middle tier. So you should have 3 that was cut on the fold right here of pattern piece number 11. All right. So you should already have your top of pattern piece number 11 already gathered. And what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to pin the side seam. So you're going to take one of pattern piece number 11 and with right sides together, let me grab one. And with right sides together, you're going to pin one of the side seams, okay? Once you pin, I'm just going to kind of like pin it for you to show you how it's supposed to look. And then you're going to do the other one the same way. So you're going to pin. You're going to pin at the notch. You have a notch right here in the back. Go ahead and pin there, pin at the top, and pin at the bottom. So, and then pin along the side seam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have that side pin, what you're going to do is open up that one out, okay? And then with right sides together, you're going to pin that third panel or the third piece. Right sides together, you're going to pin that to the side seam as well. Same thing that you just did, matching up that notch. Pin at the top, the bottom, and the length of that side seam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the side seam pin on this panel as well as the other panel, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, then finish off your seam allowance on both of those seams. After you do that, create a basting stitch. I would do this in sections. A basting stitch, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then you're going to press to that seam allowance and then press it up, creating a narrow hem. All right. Once you do that, you're going to go ahead and gather the top portion of the lower front and back and attach it onto your skirt like we have done on all the other ones. Now, remind you, you should have 3 seams because after you sew those together, you're going to sew the side seams together of the 2 remaining pieces, okay? Just kind of like we just did, the same way. The only thing is you should have 3 side seams technically. So you're going to have 2 seams that's going to go to the side, and then one of the seams needs to be attached to the back, all right? As like the center back seam, all right? You can decide how you want it to go on your skirt, all right? So go ahead and sew on the front, the lower front and back to the bottom portion of your skirt, hem it, and then we'll come back and continue with the facing pieces. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the last layer put on, the lower front and the back, this is what it looks like. If you could see, I have it completely hemmed. So instead of me serging all the way around, that's too much serger thread for me, but to each his own, right? So I did a basting stitch all the way around at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, pressed to that line, and then stitched on the right side. So that's what it's looking like so far. So I'm hoping that you are loving this tiered color block. And I'm going to bring it a little close because I know it's kind of hard for you guys to see. This is actually a navy blue. It looks faded. But that's how it looked when I picked it up from the store. So it's not accidentally dyed, fried, and laid to the side in a washing machine or anything. That's just how it looks, okay? And it looks so good right now. All right, so the only thing left to do for this skirt is the facing area. So what I'm going to do is turn it around. And what I want you to do, if you are following along, or even if you're just looking, I'm going to open up the zipper area, just like this. And I'm going to take my facing. Okay, so let me scoot the skirt off to the side right quick. Let's back up just 1 second to talk about this facing. Now, when we attach the other yoke front and back to the skirt, I told you to go ahead and sew the side seams of the front yoke to the back yoke like I did. I already explained to you that I have interfacing on both. So if you did that, cool. If not, no problem. You may not have facing on yours. It's perfectly fine. Okay? So don't worry about it. All right. So we already attached a yoke front to yoke back at the side seams. I went ahead and created a basting stitch on the notch edge, okay? So on the notch edge, make sure you create a basting stitch at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, press it up, okay? That's all I did so far. So now let's go ahead and attach this facing piece to the skirt. Now, the first thing I want to do is attach at the side seam. So I'm going to make sure it matches all the way around. So I'm going to match up that side seam and pin there. And what I'm going to do is go to the back, just like this. And I'm going to make sure that I pin this over my zipper, okay? So yes, you guys know I use long zippers, no problem there, okay? So pin right there. And I'm going to make sure that this bottom edge that you are seeing is matched up with the edge of my skirt. And I'm going to pin there because you will be sewing as close to the zipper teeth as possible without sewing on the zipper teeth, okay? So I'm going to pin there. And then you're just going to pin all the way around till you get to the other side. So go ahead and pin your yoke front and back facing to your skirt now. Your yoke front and back skirt portion. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the skirt pinned all the way around, I'm going to start at one seam. Instead of me starting in the center, I'm just going to start. Actually, I am going to start in the center. Normally, I start in the center, so I don't want to do anything that I haven't been doing. So I'm going to start in the center front using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, so all the way to the other side. Once I get to the within 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to pivot and sew close to the zipper teeth without sewing through or on the zipper teeth, just to close up this back, okay? Once I do that, I'm going to flip it over and starting right back at the center front, I'm going to do the same thing in the opposite direction. Once I get towards the zipper, I'm within 5/8 of an inch, I'm going to pivot and then sew down the zipper area. All right, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And then once you finish doing that, you're going to trim it down and then understitch. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my facing attached to my skirt, I trimmed the seam allowance down. I finished off the zipper area to make sure that it's clean. I pressed my seam allowance up towards the facing and gave it a understitch on the facing piece. So when I turn it out, so make sure you grab your point turner if you need to, which I'm going to grab mine here shortly, but I'm going to turn it all the way out on both sides where my zipper is. I'm going to grab my point turner as well and make sure that I poke the corners out to make sure that it gets a clean finish as well on both sides. And then the only thing that I need to do is basically stitch in the ditch. So I'm going to make sure that my seam allowance is pressed up towards the yoke front and back as well as the facing. And I'm going to make sure that I place my facing over that seam line, just about 1/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to actually press mine up, but I'm just showing you guys what to do right now. So basically you want to make sure that you place that over. Now you're going to pin on the right side. Now let me tell you a little trick that I do to make sure that I am catching the seam allowance. I make a basting stitch all the way across on the wrong side, but then on the right side, I go back. I'm just pinning this. But what I do is I literally pin on this side because I'm going to make basting stitch I'm going to use a basting stitch all the way across to make sure that I am catching the bottom portion of my facing right here. And then on the right side, I'm going to actually stitch about 1/8 of an inch above that stitching line to make sure that I'm catching it in the ditch, okay? I hope that made sense, but that's what I normally do when I am stitching in the ditch to make sure everything looks good. So make sure that you pin all the way across. Then you're going to go to your machine and basically stitch in the ditch. Whatever you want to do, it's your prerogative, all right? So once you do that, give it a good press, give it a good wash, and you are good to go. Now, I'm just going to show you what mine look like without this completely done so far. The zipper is flawless, just like so, right? And it will be good for me to wear once I give it a wash and a good press and wear it with the top we just finished, all right? Well, that's it for this video. Move your skirt off to the side and we're going to get to working on our pants. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we are done with the skirt, go ahead, take your refill and refill your snacks, popcorn, whatever you're eating. And let's go ahead and get over to the pants, the last part of this sew along. All right, so now that we have done our top and our skirt, we're gonna start working on view D, the pants. Now, it's pretty much the same thing as the skirt. The only difference is you have pants instead of the skirt. So I'm going to pretty much walk you through how to do that. We will be doing view D. Now, one thing I'm going to say right now is when we get to the waistband, I'm not going to walk you through that because it's the same way that you would do the waistband for your skirt. And we have already done the skirt. So with that being said, I'm just going to refer you back to the waistband of the skirt when we get to that section, all right? Now, in terms of what you will need, you will only need 5 pattern piece number 12 through 16. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct the pants. All right, so the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct the pants is, of course, if you want the pocket, it's optional for you. If you do not want like the patch pocket that's on the front of the pattern, you can definitely use some side seam pockets and install it that way as well. For these, I want patch pockets, so I'm going to install patch pockets for this one and for the sake of the tutorial as well. So that's pattern piece number 15. You need to cut to a fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 14. Your front, you need to cut to a fabric. And one thing I'm going to tell you guys is if you have not sized up your pattern, do so. I'm not going to show you how to do that because I actually have a video that already tells you how to size up your pattern. The video's entitled Let's Figure It Out. I will drop it in the description box below to show you how to size up your waist as well as your hips. All right. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 16. This is the back of your pants, view D. You need to cut to a fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 13, which is your yoke back. You need to cut for a fabric and interface 2. And then the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 12, your yoke front. You need to cut to a fabric and interface 1. Those are all the pattern pieces that you will need in order to construct these pants. This will be fairly quick. Also, you will need a 9-inch invisible zipper, okay, for these pants. That's all the fabric that you need and the notion. So let's go ahead and get to sewing. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our front pattern piece, which is pattern piece number 14. Now, what we're gonna do is, first of all, you need to stay stitch. You're gonna do the same thing on the back as well, all right? So you're going to stay stitch the upper portion of your pants. Now, I stay stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you could do a 1/2 inch if you want. That's completely up to you. That's a personal preference. And then I'm gonna move one out of the way. And what you're going to do is you're going to pin out your darts. Now, I'm gonna tell you this now while I'm pinning. You want to do the same thing for the back. So you're gonna stay stitch the upper edge and then pin out your darts on the back as well. So basically, we have done darts so many times on this channel. So you should know by now how to do darts and how to pin them out, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put one more pin right here at the dart. All right, so now that I have my dart pin, what I'm gonna do is start right here, back stitch here, and use a regular length stitch to come all the way down, follow my line, and come all the way down to this dot, and then I'm gonna pull some threads and tie it. I'm gonna do that for both my front and my back pattern piece. I highly advise you to label which ones are your front and which ones are your back. So go ahead and stay stitch the upper edge and make your darts in the front and the back now. All right, so now that I have done my darts in the front and in the back of my pants, the next thing we're gonna do are the patch pockets, which are optional. So I'm gonna move my front pattern piece out of the way and grab my pocket, which is pattern piece number 15. Now, You can't see this because I have dark fabric, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to bring it up to the camera a little bit. So if you notice, I made a basting stitch. Hold on. I know that's a little blurry. Bear with me. So I made a basting stitch right here and across the bottom and on this angle. All right. So I made a basting stitch on this angle right here at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I also made a basting stitch right down and around towards the bottom. All right. Now what you're going to do is make a narrow hem. You can pretty much see it on this side. I'm going to show you on this side, right? So basically what we're going to do, we're going to press this into the line, right? And then press it in again, forming a narrow hem, okay? And then you're going to stitch close to the edge to form that narrow hem. After you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to press this in, basically forming a narrow hem. Once again, press that in and press that in all the way around, pressing it in. Now, when you get around to the corner, what you want to do, now I created just a little E stitch. So basically on my sewing machine, I just used 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I just basically back stitch at the beginning, but not at the end. And it will basically serve as an E stitch. So if I pull it, you will notice that it'll gather a little bit to form that curve, okay? So that's what I did there. Now, what I'm gonna do is go to my ironing station and I'm gonna press all the way around, forming that narrow hem all the way around and then top stitch. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my pocket narrowed hem on the angled edge, and the front portion of the pocket and the bottom, I have it pressed really good. So now what I'm gonna do is attach it to my front pocket at the side seam. So make sure you have your pocket front, all right? And what you're going to do is you have a dot right up here. Let me try to show you. You're gonna match the dot right here with the dot on your pocket. So you should have a dot right here, mine is right here. And you're going to pin, making sure that dot match up and this dot, let me show you, this dot right here match up to this dot on your pants. And then you have a notch, make sure that your notch on the side is matching up and you want to pin, all right? So I'm gonna turn it around so you can see it better. So I'm going to pin at this notch. I'm going to pin at the bottom. And I'm going to pin at the top to keep that intact. All right. And then I'm going to go to the top of my pants. And I'm going to make sure that the dot on my pocket is meeting up with the dot on the pants. And they match up. And I'm going to pin across the top and make sure that your dart is pressed towards the front of your pants. So this is the front of my pants is this way. So my dart is facing that way as well. And I'm going to pin to keep my dart flat. And then I'm just going to pin the front portion and the bottom. So go ahead and pin the pocket in place now. All right, so now that I have the pocket pinned in place, what we're gonna do, we're gonna base across the top. We're gonna base the side, but before we base the top and side, we're gonna start at the top towards the front of your pocket using about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You could even use a 1/2 inch depending on how much you fold it in to do the narrow hem. I'm going to be using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance just to edge stitch. And you're going to edge stitch from the top right here all the way down, come around the curve and then back to the side seam. After you edge stitch, you're going to base the side to tack it down and base across the top. Once you do that, you'll have a full functional pocket. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, so now that I have the pocket done, I'm going to bring it so you could pretty much see that. I have the pocket done. The next thing we're going to do is attach the front to the back at the inseam. So grab your back pattern piece, and I'm going to lay it with right sides together. I'm going to turn it because you guys can see that the front is laying on top of my back, all right? And what you want to do is lay it right sides together. You want to pin at the notch that you have on the inseam, pin at the top, and of course pin at the bottom and along your inseam, all right? So go ahead and pin your inseam now. All right, so now that I have my inseam pinned, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, and so all the way up your inseam and then back stitch at the end. Once you do that, go ahead and finish off your seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my inseam sewn right here, what we're going to do is start working on our crotch seam. So open up your pants, your front and your back. So this side right here is my front right here, and this is my back. So go ahead and grab the other pant leg that you have just sewn. I hope you did this. And what you're going to do is lay it right sides together. So my front is on this side, my back is on this side. Now I'm going to turn it around so you do not get confused. And if you're looking at the instructions, it looks exactly like the instructions. So my front is on this side, my back is on this side. Now what we're going to do is pin up the crotch seam, which is this U shape right here, okay? So make sure you match everything up. Make sure that your seam allowance is pressed towards the back. Now, this is just a personal preference. If you like your seam allowance towards the front, hey, that's up to you. I just want my seam allowance to go in the direction of the back of my pants instead of the front, all right? So what we're going to do, we're going to pin up the front, and then in the back, you have some notches, all right? And according to the directions or instructions, right, it says to basically stop pinning 3 inches from the notch. Now, what I'm going to do is grab my ruler, and I'm going to mark 3 inches from my notch. So let me grab my tape measure, and all I'm going to do is just put a pin there. So my notch is right here, and I'm just going to go 3 inches down, which is right here. And I'm just going to put a pin right there. So I know that is where I'm going to back stitch at. Now, it's simply because in the back of your pants, you're going to have a zipper there. Now, I believe my zipper is a little shorter than that, right? Yeah, mine is a little shorter than that. So I'm going to go up just a little bit instead, simply because I'm going to basically need to shorten that area, all right? But we'll get to that here shortly. So I'm going to grab the instructions and see why we're stopping there instead of where the notches are, all right? So step number 6 says pin center seams, matching inner leg seam, the notches, stitch the center front and center back, stopping 3 inches below the notch at the center back. And then you're going to reinforce the seams, then stitch again over the first stitching, all right? On number 7, we're going to be doing the side seam. Now, like I just mentioned, because this is the invisible back zipper, what we're going to do, I'm not going to walk you through how to do an invisible back zipper, but I highly advise you to check where your zipper stopped at. Mine stopped a little bit below the notch. It says to go 3 inches down, but I'm just going to kind of, stop at that notch, put a pin there. And that's where I'm going to be stopping mine. I'm going to put 2 pins at the notch. And that's where I'm going to stop sewing. Simply because, listen, we do not have time for those problems of having a big gap, okay? So my zipper is not as long as the one that I had for the skirt. So I have to make sure that it's out of my way, number 1, but I'm going to be able to baste all the way up the center back, okay? So depending on how long yours is, you can stop 3 inches down. If you choose, you can stop at the notch. If you choose as well, that's completely up to you. But what we're going to do is go ahead and pin the crotch from the front to either the notch, 3 inches below the notch, whatever you decide to want to stop, okay? So go ahead and pin the crotch seam up now. So now that I have my crotch seams done, now what's on the table that you're looking at is the back. And if you notice, I did not attach where the zipper is yet. And the reason why is because we have to put on our waistband or yoke front and back. So I'm not going to attach that yet where the zipper is. But if you notice that I will go ahead and put some interfacing here shortly. And I went ahead and finished off the back like I told you to. All right. So now what we're going to do is right sides together, place my front onto my back, and I'm going to sew up the side seams. Now I'm going to show you how to do this one, and then you could do the other side yourself. Now, one thing I like to do is pin from the bottom to the top. So I'm just going to turn it over where my back is laying on top of my front. So I could definitely pin from the bottom up. Now I'm going to match my notches on the side. I'm going to pin at the top, pin at the bottom, and then I'm going to pin the length of my pant legs. So go ahead and do that on both pant legs now. Now that I have pinned my side seam using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, you're going to back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end, and then we're going to sew all the way up and finish off our seam allowance on both of the side seams. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our side seam sewn, this is the front of my pants. So the side seam is sewn. So what I'm going to do is turn it right side out. And this is what your pants are looking like right now. This is the front looking up at me. You're going to go ahead and move your pants off to the side. You can go ahead and try it on. If it's too tight and you have not sewn your, if you have not serged these side seams, you can loosen it up by taking it out 1/4 of an inch at a time and then baste it together. If it is completely tight and you already did that, you might have to cut another pair of pants and follow the steps all over again. If you are not like very comfortable doing pants, I would highly advise you to test a muslin. You just need to cut the front, the back, pattern pieces, and then I would just make them like Daisy Dukes coochie cutters or some shorts just to get the fit from basically all the way down to your knee or your thigh area. If you are just new to pants. All right, so I've been doing a lot of pants lately to kind of give you an idea of fit, you know, for pants, because you guys have asked me last year to, you know, do more sew alongs for pants and shorts and things of that nature. So that's what I'm doing for you now. All right. So now we're going to move our pants off to the side, do our waistband. Now I'm not going to walk you through how to do the waistband. The only thing I'm going to walk you through is after doing the waistband, basically what you're going to do is the hem. So the only thing that I'm kind of going to walk you through is putting on the waistband, because it's pretty much the same way that you do the skirt. No difference whatsoever. So once you sew up your waistband, right, you're going to sew up your waistband, attach it the same way that you did for the skirt, and insert your zipper. And the only thing left for you to do is do your hem. All right. So I am just doing a regular hem. I did not do the dot situation because I don't like that slit situation on the side of my pants. The hem allowance for your pants is 1 1/4. So what you're going to do, I'm just going to serge my seam allowance and then just turn up 1 1/4 inch of 1 1/4 inch, and then stitch on the top all the way around. All right. Once you do that, your pants are all done. Give it a press. give it a wash, give it a press, take some photos. And if you make these pants, you guys know what to do by now. Go ahead and tag me on Instagram at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. I love to share your creations when you follow one of these sew along or just sew a pattern that I have already sewn, all right? I like to share. So go ahead and tag me on Instagram at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. So that's it for the pants. Until next time. All right, so there you have it. That's the complete pattern review and sew along. I hope you enjoyed. And if you make this pattern, you guys know what to do is tag me so I can show everyone else your creation. When you follow any one of my sew alongs or sew a pattern that I have sewn as well and you tag me, I will share. I like to share, you guys. You guys know that about me, all right? Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. And since you made it this far, do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe button, and also smash that notification bell so you are notified every time your girl uploads a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video. And as always, keep sewing.